Welcome to the Receptor Evaluations and Receptor Evaluation Form Updates training. Next slide, please. My name is Alyssa Ambacher, and I will be moderating today's training along with Jessica Schwartz. We're from the CSRR Training Committee. Next slide, please. If you're here for continuing education credits, we did apply for 2.5 technical credits for this training session. They have not been approved yet. The attendance requirements for earning those CECs is that you must be logged in for the entirety of the session and answer 3 out of 4 poll questions that are randomly inserted in the presentation. Next slide, please. So like I said, the board has not yet approved the CECs, but in the future what will happen is we will compile a list of the eligible members who want CECs, and we'll give that to the LSRPA. And then the LSRPA will contact you with additional information on how to get those credits. So just keep in mind that that information will be coming from the LSRPA, not from CSRR or from the department. Next slide, please. If you've done any trainings with us before, you recognize this slide. This is the test your knowledge slide. This is what you'll see when a poll question is about to appear on your screen. Next slide, please. So the question will appear, and then you'll have a pop-up screen where you can make your selection. Please make sure you make that selection in that pop-up screen and not in the chat box. Next slide, please. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions throughout today's training. If you look at the agenda, you will see there are specific times when we will be answering questions out loud, but you can feel free to put any questions that you have in that questions box throughout the presentation. And then we'll get to them during those question and answer segments. And if we don't have time to get to your question, you will hear from us in the coming weeks with answers via email to those questions. And then make sure that your questions are brief and not case specific. We don't want to, spend too much time getting into case specifics, so just keep them general. Next slide, please. And remember, you can fill out the course evaluation, and that will be dropped in the chat as well for you to click on. And that helps us decide what trainings we're going to do in the future and improve all of our trainings. Next slide. So while you're here, make sure you participate, ask questions, complete polls, and then provide feedback for us. Like I said, we do go through that feedback, and we try to incorporate that feedback as we can. Next slide, please. All right, so up next, we have Joe Purse from the LSRPA, and he's going to do some remarks from them. So Joe, whenever you're ready.
All right. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'm going to say I have landscapers taking care of the leaves today. If you hear leaf blowers in the background, my apologies. This is the NJDEP Receptor Evaluations and Receptor Use Evaluation Form Updates presentation. Next slide. We have a list of presenters. I'm not going to go through them all, but they include both individuals from the DEP as well as practicing LSRPs in the state. Next slide. We want to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, the LSRPA could not be giving these trainings for events that we all depend on for our continuing education credits and for remaining informed on New Jersey environmental technical regulations, etc. Thank you to our diamond partners. Next slide. I also want to take a moment to thank all of our gold sponsors. Thank you for your support. Next slide. And of course, we want to thank our silver sponsors. Thank you for all your assistance. Next slide. The LSRP is committed to DEI, and this slide recognizes that we work in a world where people's brains think, learn, and process information differently. Teams benefit from a wide range of skills, including attention to detail and pattern recognition. Next slide, please. Upcoming courses, LSRPA has the child daycare training, and the DEP is giving a training on the Site Remediation Reform Act Amendments Rule. Next slide. And upcoming trainings in 2026 include SARA amendments, state of known quality protocols, and due diligence in New Jersey. Next slide, please. The LSRPA is teaming up with SWEP, Beacon, and the New York City Brownfield Partnership on an event for November 18th, From Vision to Venture, Women Launching Environmental Enterprises. We'd like to see you there. Next slide. The LSRPA has a networking event, Bring a Friend Fall Networking Event, November 20th at the Old Heights Brewery in Heightstown, New Jersey. Once again, hope to see you. Next slide. The LSRPA conference is on March 25th and 26th. Mark your calendars, New Brunswick, New Jersey. Next slide. Stay connected, LinkedIn, X, follow the LSRPA. Next slide. And if you're not a member of the LSRPA, please join. And I think that takes us through the intro slides. It does.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Up next, we have Gwen Zerbis. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Gwen Zervis. I'm the Director of the Division of Remediation Management in our Contaminated Site Remediation and Redevelopment program. Next slide. So this training was developed as part of our Remediation Process Improvement Initiative, which we refer to as RPII, and that was started in 2023. It was a collaborative effort. We wanted to get as many people involved as possible to give their input. So we had members from DEP, LSRPs, the regulated community, and stakeholders. And our goal was to improve the communication between LSRPs and DEP to improve the remediation process overall. Next slide. Formed committees to address certain topics that were identified by all those involved in the process. And one of the committees was the Guidance Training Committee, which is who's going to be presenting today. And the goal is to provide LSRPs information on how to conduct a thorough receptor evaluation. We realized that doing a good receptor evaluation is the most important step in the beginning of the remediation process and throughout the process. So we're going to use that information to complete the receptor evaluation form, which has recently been updated. Next slide. And I'd just like to thank all the members of the committee. They're all listed here. We have the external members, most are presenting today, and also the internal DEP members. So thank you all. Next slide. That's it for me. I'll turn it back over to you, Alyssa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gwen. And I am the next speaker, so I'm going to introduce myself again, this time representing the Bureau of Case Assignment and Initial Notice. My name is Alyssa Ambacher. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about the receptor evaluation first. So what is the purpose of the receptor evaluation? This evaluation identifies all potential human and ecological receptors at or near a site, and it evaluates all contaminant migration pathways. And then we have the receptor evaluation form, and that summarizes those findings for the department. The requirements for the receptor evaluation are outlined in the tech regs at 1.12 through 1.16. Next slide, please. So the receptor evaluation form, along with all of our other forms, can be found in our forms library page, which the link is there on your screen, and it will also be dropped in the chat. Make sure that you check this website periodically because we do revise forms as needed, and it's important to use the most up-to-date form because it will make administrative review a lot quicker and more efficient. So like I said, check in with that website periodically. The receptor evaluation form can be submitted in a couple of different ways. The first way is via the NJDEP online portal, and that would be with a remedial phase report. Please note that this requires a completed authorization to submit a report/form through NJDEP online, and that has recently been updated to include certifications for LNAPL and the receptor evaluation form. So again, make sure you're using the most updated form because it will make review go more quickly. And then the other way to submit a receptor evaluation form is via the SRP submissions email that you can see there on your screen. And please note that this requires a different form. It requires the cover certification form to be attached to it if it's submitted via email. Next slide, please. As with many submissions at the department, there are timeframes associated with the initial receptor evaluation. So you can see there the regulatory timeframe is within 1 year after the earliest requirement to remediate listed in ARCs. And then the mandatory time frame is within 2 years of the earliest of any of the events listed in ARCs at 2.2, 1 through 6. And it is important to comply with these time frames. If you miss a time frame, it can make future time frame extension requests get denied because you're out of compliance. And it can also prevent merging related cases. If you need to merge them at any point in time, you won't be able to if you haven't submitted that receptor evaluation in time because you'll be out of compliance. And there are also other penalties associated. So again, you want to make sure you're complying with timeframes. Next slide, please. And then there are times when you have to submit an updated receptor evaluation. So you'd be submitting this with various documents such as the immediate environmental concern source control report, the remedial investigation report, or the remedial action report. Next slide, please. And then there are site conditions that would trigger an updated receptor evaluation. So if known concentration or the extent of contamination at a site increases, if a new AOC is identified, if a new receptor is identified, or if a new exposure pathway is identified, an updated receptor evaluation should be performed. You don't need to submit it at the time that you perform it. It doesn't need to be submitted as a standalone document. It can be submitted with your next remedial phase submission, but you do need to do the evaluation. Next slide, please. And then here we have just the first section of the Receptor evaluation form, section A. It's basic site information. And again, it notes that if this form is being submitted anywhere other than online, you need to have that cover certification form attached. So if you're submitting it via email, cover certification form. If it's through the remedial phase online service, it'll be the authorization form. And then you'll indicate which type of submission. So if it's an initial receptor evaluation, you only need to check that first box that says initial RE submission. You don't need to check any of those other 7 boxes lower down in the screenshot. That's just if you're submitting an updated receptor evaluation. And then also if you have one PI number that has multiple cases and you're submitting multiple receptor evaluations, we do ask that you submit separate forms just because it makes the administrative process more clear and it just keeps things a little bit more straight in our system, especially if cases are being merged later. It's just clearer for us. So again, if you have multiple case numbers, please submit separate receptor evaluation forms. Next slide, please. And then finally, is a receptor evaluation always required? No. So you do not have to do receptor evaluation if an unrestricted use response action outcome is completed before the due date of the initial receptor evaluation or within 1 year after initiation of remediation. But you do still need to do an ecological evaluation as outlined in the tech regs. Next slide, please. And that's all I have for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Moving forward, we are hearing from Joe Peirce again.
There I am. Okay. We're going through this by section, so now we're going to go over section B, on-site and surrounding property use. I'm aware that most people do not have problems with this section, and this portion of the presentation is not very long, but we're going to go through the land use section of the RE really quickly. Next slide, please. We're going to go through it question by question. So the first question, question 1 of the land use section, is identify any sensitive populations uses that are currently on site or within 200 feet of the site property boundary, and check all that apply. And here's a screenshot from the form: residences, schools, childcare centers, public parks, or any other sensitive population uses. Now, what should you put here? Use your professional judgment as LSRPs. An example may be a church, whatever. Next slide. Okay, so first of all, what is the site property boundary? Well, obviously, it's the boundaries of the tax parcels on which your site is located. And then, of course, the question is, should you consider something else? The extent of off-site soil contamination. If you are investigating soils off your site and they contain standards above or impacts above standards, this should inform your decision. But overall, it's basically just going to be the boundaries of the tax parcels on which your site is located. Next slide. Okay, so where can you find property classifications? Where can you find land use? Well, there are many publicly available sources. To the right of the slide is a screenshot of one of my legends from one of my land use figures. This is an example of the types of land use classifications you would get from these public sources. You can get it from the NJDEP Bureau of GIS, the New Jersey Geographic Information Network, or you could get them from the definitions of the property classes from New Jersey Administrative Code. Links for all these are provided. Next slide. But once you do this, are you done? No. You still have to do a site inspection or an internet search. You can't just depend on publicly available sources. The property classifications are often incorrect or not up to date. They may not reflect specific nuances for a property. So, for example, churches or private entities may offer daycare services. Other businesses may have private playgrounds. You know, we've all seen Playland in a McDonald's. Does this mean you have to identify that as a park? No, but you should be aware of it and consider the situation and whether or not it needs to be called out as part of your land use evaluation. Next slide. There's a sub-question for number 1. It says, for each box checked above, include the following: facility name, address, type of use, and a map depicting each location relative to the site. So to address the facility name, address, and type of use, below I have a screenshot of a land use table that I prepared for one of my receptor evaluations. Most of this information just comes from the public sources. You can copy and paste right into an Excel file, updated as appropriate per your any site inspections that you may have seen that cause you to think that the property class is not quite correct. But the screenshot you see below, it's not overly complicated. It's just a very simple list of the land uses within 200 feet of your property. Next slide. Now this pertains to the map portion of sub-question 1 that they asked for. I have 2 screenshots. I have, first of all, a screenshot of the actual map view of a land use figure that I prepared for a receptor evaluation, as well as the legend that I have for that same figure. It has the site boundary, the 200-foot radius around the site property boundary, and the other tax plots and lots. Now, this is not a discussion on how to use GIS or CAD, but you'll have to engage with an individual who knows how to use GIS and CAD to take the information from the public sources and plot it so that you can color code the land use classifications within 200 feet of your site. But if you have a figure like this, this meets the DEP's needs and for the receptor evaluation for land use. Next slide. Question 2, current site uses, really not that complicated. What's the property used for? Check more than one if necessary. The only thing I'm going to point out is for other people go, well, what should I put here? Well, it depends on your LSRP professional judgment. An example that I put in, I have a site that actually includes riparian waters. So I put that in the other box. There may be other things that you think are worth flagging, but it's up to your discretion. Next slide. Question 3, plan future on-site uses and off-site uses within 200 feet of the site property boundary. Check all that apply. How are you going to determine future on-site and off-site uses? Well, you could certainly submit an OPRA request to the local municipality that basically just says, are there any planned future changes in land use for the site or adjacent properties? And they get that information, and now you have it for your files. If there's some change that's occurring, make sure you note it. You can ask your client or the property owner. They often know what's going on around their properties. Lastly, the form goes, any changes, provide a map depicting the location of the proposed changes in land use. Now, I've never actually had to make this figure for any of my receptor evaluations, but if you come across something where an industrial coded property is being converted to land use, to residential, make a figure that shows that. I don't believe it has to be overly complicated. And I think that next slide, and I think we might actually be done. We are. Land use, not very complicated. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joe. Up next, we have Emily and Liam from BIR, and they are going to talk about Section C and D.
Hello, I am Emily Aquino. I'm from the department in BIR, and I function as our receptor team lead.
And good morning, guys. I am Liam Cami. I'm an environmental specialist with BIR.
All right, and we are going to talk to you today about common issues we see with receptor evaluations and the RE form section C and D. Next slide. All right, so let's start off with REs are mixed media only. Even if they're being submitted with the media-specific report, all sections must be filled out. So for example, if you have a soils-only report that's being submitted, the groundwater section must still be filled out to accurately reflect the site. So if groundwater was known to be above the groundwater quality standards, the updated well search would still have to be completed within the last 2 years. So soils only doesn't matter for the report. It's REs are mixed media only. Next slide. All right, now kind of a version of the last one, please fill out all required boxes. We've been seeing a lot of specific questions left blank on the RE. If there's a complicated answer, still select an answer. You can leave a qualifier as shown in red in the examples below, and you can attach an additional page to the RE form. Blank questions lead the department to further review to understand the situation and may result in us requesting a completed RE form to be resubmitted. So to avoid our extra review time and going back and forth with you, please answer all of the questions. Next slide. All right, reevaluate receptors with the reissuance of UREs. This is in addition to the update in property use and updated well search. If we're relying on old approvals, we have to question, do they hold up to today's standards and can they still be considered protective? We want to consider order of magnitude, or were additional potable wells triggered, identified, and a new door-to-door survey warranted? Was long-term monitoring triggered and additional indoor air sampling needed? We don't want to just copy and paste the old RE. We want to continue to evaluate receptors and then fill out UREs accordingly. Next slide. All right, door-to-door survey responses. They can be attached to the RE form or be included with the phase document that's being submitted. We just ask when you are filling out the form if you can indicate which one that is to us, just because our inspectors often have to hunt for this one. So that would help us with our review and inspection process. FAQs regarding the door-to-door survey can be found at the link below and was included in the chat already. Next slide. With the issuance of the new rules update, the phrase door-to-door is no longer included. This was because the confusion regarding the phrase. People often misinterpreted it to mean the department only accepted knocking like physically on doors. This was not the case then, and it's not the case now. We accept multiple lines of evidence when completing the survey, some of which could include certified mail, uncertified mail. Is the property serviced by a local water purveyor? Is there a local ordinance prohibiting the installation of wells? So the collection of these multiple lines of evidence would also be acceptable in performing the survey. Next slide. And I believe I'm now handing it over to Liam.
Yes. Thank you very much, Emily. I'm going to be going over Section C and Section D. So we'll start with Section C. This is our newer section to the receptor evaluation. Can I please go to the next slide? So Section C is going to provide you with a list of documents that could be required to be submitted with the receptor evaluation. Not every document listed in Section C is going to be necessary for every single receptor evaluation submission. For example, if there's no groundwater contamination, then you're not going to include a door-to-door and a well search. But however, if you do feel that something not on the list needs to be included for your receptor evaluation to be more efficiently explained, then you can just kind of attach that with a note, tell us where it is, or attach it at the bottom of the receptor evaluation. And although sometimes everything in that Section C might not be required, if you do give us additional information, the only thing that's going to happen is we're going to expedite our review process. So it's really, it's a better thing for you if we have more information than we need. Next slide.
All right, we have our first test your knowledge question. So that should launch shortly. All documents in Section C must be included with every receptor evaluation submission, true or false. All right, so the poll should launch. Make sure you open on that screen where you can select true or false. We'll give you about a minute to answer this question. And make sure that, excuse me, if you are looking to get continuing education credits for this training, that you are answering 3 out of 4 of the poll questions that will be posted throughout the presentation. All right, you have about 15 seconds. It looks like most of you have voted. Make sure you're getting those responses in if you want credits. All right, and the poll is going to close in about 5 seconds. All right, next slide, please. And the answer is false. As Liam said, you don't necessarily need to include every single document each time. Liam, back to you.
Thank you. So some changes have obviously been made from version 2.5 to version 2.7 of the RE. This link should be provided in the chat. It just basically tells you some of the changes that have been made, highlights those to help you out with any questions you might have about those. Next slide. And then similarly, this is just instructions for version 2.7, how to fill out the receptor evaluation form, and a link provided. Next slide. Okay, moving on to Section D, descriptions of contamination. Next slide, please. So for item 1, you're going to be identifying if free product is present. If it is present, you're going to clarify whether it is LNAPL or DNAPL and the date identified. You will also identify if residual product is present, and you'll be identifying if any other potential source materials are present at the site. Next slide, please. So while we were on the topic of that, we should go over some general definitions of free product and residual product. So free product is going to be defined as separate phase material present at a concentration greater than a contaminant's than a contaminant's saturation point as determined pursuant to methodologies described in our tech regs. And this definition applies to solids, liquids, and semi-solids. Residual product is going to be separate phase material present in concentrations below a contaminant's residual saturation point retained in soil or geologic matrix pore spaces or fractures by capillary forces, determined again pursuant to the methodologies described in our tech regs. For further detail specifically on the basis and background of residual product of petroleum products and mixtures, please refer to Appendix 3.1 of the EPH guidance. So this can kind of be, a lot of LSRPs are familiar with the sponge analogy. So free product can be thought of as a sponge that is so saturated with product that it is moving, it is mobile, is moving out of the sponge, while residual product can be thought of as a sponge that has been wrung out. So there is still product present. However, it is contained within the matrix of that material. And determination of residual product is going to obviously be based on many site-specific properties, as well as geochemical and geophysical conditions and physiochemical properties of the specific contaminant that is being examined. And just to go over the general definition of residual saturation point, that is the saturation point below which non-aqueous phase liquid becomes discontinuous, is immobilized by capillary forces, and fluid drainage will not occur. So free product is above residual saturation point, and residual product is below that residual saturation point. Next slide, please. So item 2 is just going to be asking you if soil contamination that remains has been delineated. If you answer yes, then you'll also answer whether all soils are either below the applicable remediation standards or being addressed by an institutional control. Good example of an institutional control would be a deed notice. Next slide, please. So item 3 just states that unless your receptor evaluation form was submitted with a remedial phase report, that you'll be providing a brief summary of the contamination with a description of contaminants concern, their concentrations, and the range of contaminant levels if necessary. So that is only if it is not already being submitted with a remedial phase report, for example, an IEC source control report, a remedial investigation report, or a remedial action report. Next slide. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Emily and Liam. Now we are going to be taking some questions from the chat for about 10 minutes. If your question doesn't get answered at this time, someone from DEP will reach out by email to provide you an answer to your question. Starting off, we have RE forms have always assumed there are changes within 200 feet. Do you want us to leave section B3 blank or use a text box that says no known changes? Maybe Emily, if you want to hop on, or Liam.
Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
Yes, I can definitely repeat that.
Cutting out here.
RE forms have always assumed there are changes within 200 feet. Do you want us to leave section B3 blank or use a text box that says no known changes?
Section B3. I am not sure the answer to that, actually.
I can take a stab at it if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay, it just says, the question says planned future uses. It doesn't say planned future use changes. So if the future use is the same as the current use, then you would just populate the same information. So question C3 specifically says planned future on-site uses and off-site uses within 200 feet. It doesn't explicitly say planned future changes in on-site, off-site use.
This person did say B3 as in boy. Is that the section you were referring to? Okay,
boy.
Perfect. Sorry, maybe I misheard.
Okay.
All right. We have another question here. Are we allowed to add text boxes to RE form, or does that break the submittal, such as not being able to be read digitally or it doesn't print to PDF?
You should be able to.
Yeah, I feel like we see that a decent amount.
Thank you. How does the department want us to complete the RE forms for when historic fill is assumed contaminated for both soil and groundwater? This scenario, no data was collected.
You would still put yes contamination, but if you want to put a little qualifier on there, just saying historic fill only, that would make it easier for us.
Yeah, as long as there's some sort of explanation.
Common issues with receptor evaluations. You mentioned that you can add a text box call out that says see attached page. However, I've had issues adding text boxes like this to the form and they bounce back in the portal. Has that issue been fixed?
I cannot speak to that. I'm not sure.
We can get back to you by email, no problem.
I was just going to jump in and say, I don't know that that's specifically a portal issue. Just as someone in BCAN, like we're getting the receptor evaluation forms first. And I haven't noticed an issue where like we get ones that are submitted via the online portal that have those text boxes and attached pages. But that's definitely something, if that's an online portal issue, we can look into that. But from what I can tell, it doesn't seem to be automatically bouncing those back because of that. So it might be something else. But like I said, we can look into that.
Awesome. The next one says, Not clear on Section C figures and tables. Does department now want figures and tables for any contaminated matrix? Reason is REs are typically submitted with a remedial phase report.
If it is included within the report, it does not have to be included in the receptor evaluation. It's often that we see pointing to old reports, that it was in a historic report, that it was there, so it's not included in either location now. So if it's still included in just the report, that's fine.
Thank you. Are we able to note comments or add text boxes to the RE form? Seems the online service for RIR gives error when comments/additional text is noted in the form.
I think that's
feel like we
following up on
might have
that same
answered
one.
that.
Yeah.
It sounds like you should be able to add text boxes and everything to the form. So
Yeah,
hopefully
because
you've done
personally, I see quite a few that do have text boxes added, so this is
that.
news to me.
Can I, and I mean, I don't know if this is specifically the situation. I've had REs bounce back at me when I take the active form, the one that you can fill out, and I convert it to, like I print to PDF so that all the stuff gets locked in so the check boxes aren't active anymore. I've had that bounce back and had the DEP tell me that they need it to be an active form for the processes to work. So maybe the people who are asking these questions did what I did, where they print it so that it's locked in so they can't, maybe that's what's causing some of the bounce back for some of the people on the call.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, our next one, for an initial RE submittal, is a CID required? The cover certification form seems to imply that a CID is required.
Alyssa?
I'm not totally sure. I don't think a SID has to be submitted.
I don't think so either.
The SID has to be submitted with all key documents. So if the receptor evaluation is being submitted with the key document, then the SID should be submitted as well.
Thank you. What's the well search requirements for historic fill sites with a CEA VIC?
You do not have to complete the well search if it is only historic fill related contamination. The EE would still have to be completed though.
Okay. We can hold on another minute or two to see if any other questions come in. Actually, I think I have a couple more I can ask. When responding to questions on the RE form, should answers solely reflect current conditions? For example, if VI samples were historically collected, but there are no longer groundwater concentrations above their respective VI screening levels, and the VI investigation is complete, do we need to report on the VI sampling in the revised RE?
I would request yes, you please do, because the condition the sampling did exist. And it just confuses us when one report says yes and then the next says no, and then it requires us to look further into it. Include the qualifier if you want to say it's now below, but please, yes, reflect the sampling that occurred.
In general, more explanation always welcome at the department. And it looks like this will be my last one, but with Daniel's Law in effect in New Jersey, it appears that GeoWeb, MOD, IV, and/or NJ Gin have removed all property owners' names. Is it a requirement to identify specific property owners, which would have to be done via a certified property list request, or will the department accept just the address?
Lynn?
I can reread if needed.
Sorry, what was that?
Okay, let me try again. Sorry, it might have been me. With Daniel's Law in effect in New Jersey, it appears that GeoWeb, Mod IV, and/or NJGIN have removed all property owners' names. Is it a requirement to identify specific property owners, which would have to be done via a certified property list request, or will the department accept just the address?
For a well search, we're looking for the address. We're looking to see what, and that you contact them to see what wells that they have. I will get back to you to confirm what we want you to submit.
All right, and it looks like I actually have one more for you guys. For historic fill, don't you need to do the well search within the limits of the historic fill extents?
I believe within your site boundaries.
We may or may not have a couple more coming in. I think we are all good.
All right, yeah, sorry, I was just scrolling through to make sure we got all the questions. All right, so that's what we have time for right now. So what we're going to do is we are going to head into our break a little bit early. Make sure you are back by 11 a.m. and we will continue the training.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome back, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute with Joe Purse. All right, it's 11 o'clock. Welcome, Joe. Welcome to get started.
Should I just get going? I guess so. All right, well, we'll just get going. Welcome back, everyone. Now we're going to be discussing Section E, the groundwater use section of the receptor evaluation form. This section is a little more involved and a lot longer than the land use section, so bear with me. Next slide, please. All right, this presentation is for populating Section E of the receptor evaluation form. This is not a discussion of when a groundwater investigation has been triggered. The groundwater use section of the receptor evaluation form is an ongoing effort, so it's never really done per se. Well searches need to be updated every 2 years until an REO has been issued, and this update needs to occur regardless of when milestone reports, RIR, RAR, are submitted. Next slide, please. All right, questions 1 through 4 of the groundwater use section, we're not going to really go over them. They're things like, has a groundwater investigation been required? Has it been conducted? We're not going to discuss these 4 questions as part of this presentation. Basically, these are answered based on the LSRP's knowledge and experience with the site. Next slide. Okay, let's just go over some time frames really quickly. Per the tech reg, section 1.14, receptor evaluation, within 90 days, you're to conduct a well search if groundwater impact at the site is above the groundwater quality standard. So you're supposed to be doing these well searches almost immediately within 3 months of detecting groundwater contamination. Within 120 days, you're supposed to sample each potable well, and sometimes irrigation wells, that are located within NJDEP prescribed radii, which we're going to discuss later, or each community or non-community supply well within the Tier 1 wellhead protection area. Okay, so the DEP expects you to address potential receptors quickly. Now, note that you don't have to sample a community or non-community supply well within the Tier 1 wellhead protection area if the well has been sampled pre-treatment and the analytical results are available within the last 3 months. So, for example, the water purveyor may have sampled that well 2 months ago and give you the results. You can rely on those results. You don't have to get your own sample since it was within the last 2 months. And as I noted previously, every 2 years you have to update the well search. Next slide. Question 5. Has groundwater contamination been delineated to the applicable remediation standard? Now, we're not going to go through how to delineate groundwater. We're just going to discuss how to answer this question in light of the requirements of receptor evaluation. So it depends on when you're submitting the receptor evaluation. So, for example, for the purposes of a remedial investigation, you can say groundwater is delineated through extrapolation. We're going to discuss this a little bit more. But for the purposes of a remedial action, you need clean endpoint sampling for both horizontal and vertical extents. You can't use extrapolation for the RI, for receptor evaluation submitted as part of an RA. Next slide. Okay, so I'm sure many of us are familiar with the January 2020 interpretation of technical requirements for site remediation requirements to complete remedial investigation. The link is provided. Basically what it says is for the purposes of a remedial investigation, you have sufficient information to know the nature and extent of a discharge of a contaminant both on-site and off-site for delineation purposes for an RI. Next slide. Note that the DEP to remedy confusion, the DEP is updating this language in the tech regs. The proposed language changes the tech regs at 4.2 and 4.3 to expressly include reference to procedures required in the RI phase. So basically it says the PRCR may delineate the horizontal and vertical extent of contamination to the remediation standard or delineate soil and groundwater by extrapolation or modeling, application of a conceptual site model, or other means for determining the extent of contamination. However, in section 5.2 of the tech regs, the language is amended to say that delineation via extrapolation or modeling is prohibited in the RA. So basically the upcoming tech regs, the revised tech regs language, are incorporating the 2020 policy that the DEP issued and has been discussed on the last slide. So let's go to the next slide. So now, how should you answer? Is groundwater delineated, yes or no? Okay, so for initial receptor evaluation, it's based on your professional judgment, and you're allowed to say no. Your initial receptor evaluation is due within a year, maybe 2 if you get the extension. You haven't completed your RI, it's completely fine to say no for groundwater delineation for the initial receptor evaluation. However, if you're submitting it as part of an RIR, you can't answer no. It has to be yes. But, you can do this via clean endpoint sampling, but you don't necessarily have to. As we discussed previously, you are allowed to use extrapolation or other means for being able to say yes. Okay. However, if you're submitting a receptor evaluation as part of a remedial action report, you cannot say no, and your delineation has to be the clean endpoint sample. You cannot use extrapolation. The one exception to this is if you're preparing an RIR, RAR for a soil or AOC only RAR. Next slide. Question 6, what is the groundwater classification for the site? I have a screenshot of the form. Most of us are going to be class 2A, but how do you figure this out? Okay, essentially it's class 2A unless you're in the Pinelands, which is class 1A, or class 3B, which is typically, but not always, near the ocean. Okay, and you can find the requirements for achieving class 3B at the groundwater standard section 1.5, the link is provided. The Pinelands extents can be found online. The class 3B is a site-specific petition to the DEP. Next slide. All right, so if you want to find the extent of Pinelands, you can also find the extent of bedrock aquifers, by the way, too, if you need that as part of your receptor evaluation. But specifically for the extent of the Pinelands, you can go to the Water or Geology tab on GeoWeb, and they both have checkboxes for the Pinelands. Next slide. Okay, so on the left is the extent of the Pinelands, class 1A, per GeoWeb. On the graphic on the right is just the bedrock aquifers, if you need that. There's also a graphic in the groundwater rule, 7.9c, that also shows the extent of the Pinelands, and that's the center. Question 7, has a well search been completed? Now this question isn't necessarily written very well. It should be more along the lines of, has a credible well search been completed within the last 2 years? Okay. Completed is also not really correct. It should be conducted because a well search is never actually completed until the RAO is issued. But to answer yes or no to this question, it should just be through your LSRP's professional judgment. Have you conducted a credible well search at this point? So that's how you should read that question. Next slide. How do you conduct a well search? Okay, well, the initial step is you're going to go to Data Miner and you're going to conduct an XY well search for SRP receptor evaluation. So I have a couple of graphics. The one on the left is the home page. Click on select category. You'll get to another page. Click on the keyword, type in XY well search, and then one of the options will be the XY well search for SRP receptor evaluations. And then you click on that. Next slide. You'll put in the XY coordinates of the center of your site. Now keep in mind that the XY well search gives you a return that is 1.25 miles. Now the well search is supposed to be a mile radius, but they give you default results of 1.25 miles. Now what happens if you have a very large site or if you have a very large plume that is greater than 0.25 miles? Then you'll have to run this well search multiple times to make sure you're capturing all wells that are within a mile of the site. Next slide. Once you get the XY well search, you'll get the data miner will return a page that looks like this. You can download it in PDF or Excel. I like Excel. It's generally more manipulatable. Just as a quick flag, the circle towards the lower left has active links where you can download the well documents, the well permit, the well record, etc. It's a nice little tool, good functionality. Typically is only available for wells over the last 10, maybe 15 years. Older wells, they don't have this level of functionality. Next slide. Once you've done the XY well search for SRP sites, are you done doing your well search? You are not. You now need to do a 5-mile radius search to look for wells that have water allocation permits. So how do you do that? Well, you submit a request to the email address you see on the screen. The text below it is what I send in. It is not required to be sent in. However, this is the language that I use, and it's always worked, so you can just take this and copy and paste it into an email, and you submit it, and the DEP will send you the results. Next slide. Well, they'll actually first send you an invoice, of course. You'll get the invoice, you'll sign it, you'll scan it, you'll write a check, you'll scan that, and then you'll email it right back to the DEP. They're actually very nice. They won't bother cashing your check first. They will actually accept the scan of your check, and they'll consider that payment. So you can get your 5-mile radius search request very quickly, in less than a day, actually. DEP is very responsive and nice when it comes to these types of requests. When they respond to you with the results, you'll get an Excel file that looks like the graphic you see on the left side of the slide. I do want to point out that frequently they do provide a lot of XY coordinates, but they don't always provide the XY coordinates for the wells. So if you really need to know where that water allocation well is, you'll have to do some more sleuthing. You'll have to contact the people who own the well, et cetera, in order to get the exact location of those wells. I will say most of the water allocation wells that I'm provided by the DEP do include XY coordinates, so they're usually pretty easy to just plop on a figure for evaluation later. Next slide, please. Okay, you have now conducted the XY well search through Data Miner and have requested the 5-mile radius search, so you're done, right? No, you also still need to submit requests to the local and county health departments to see if they have records on wells that the DEP does not have. It'd also be a good time to just ask if there are any local ordinances that prohibit well installation. Next slide. Okay, you now have the coordinates for the wells. What do you do next? Well, you got to prepare a figure. Now, I just want to say once again, this is not a discussion, a GIS or a CAD discussion on how to use those platforms to present your wells. You'll just have to engage with somebody who knows how to use those platforms for you if you don't know how to use them yourselves. But when you prepare the map, what do you want to have on your map? Well, you want to have the outline of the site as well as the plume boundary, and this is based on your knowledge as the LSRP. You want to put down the identified wells that you get from the XY well search and the 5-mile radius search. But then you also want to have on, and I'm going to go over all the items in the red box, you want to have the Atlas sheet coordinates, also known as the focus search areas, the wellhead protection areas, the DEP prescribed radii, and the water purveyors in the area. Next slide. Okay, so Atlas sheet coordinates, they're also called the focus search areas. You can go on to GeoWeb. They also have these at the New Jersey Geographic Information Network. But under the grids tab under GeoWeb, there's a checkbox for well program grid, I believe that says. These are the Atlas sheet coordinates. So at the lower left, I have a screenshot of a well. Many of us have seen these numbers that are circled in red. These are the Atlas sheet coordinates. This is basically what the DEP or the state used to identify the coordinates or locations of wells before they came up with the New Jersey State Plane Coordinate System. Next. Wellhead protection areas, once again, GeoWeb, underwater, they have a click box for the wellhead protection areas. Download the information, incorporate that into your map as well. Next slide. And then the DEP radii, these are from regulations. Now keep in mind that the radii that you use to evaluate wells as part of your well search are from the extent of the groundwater plume. It's not from the property boundary, it's not from the AOC. So if you have a groundwater plume that's extending off site a good distance, the amount of wells you'll have to evaluate potentially are going to increase greatly. So under the regulations, you have the half-mile radius. This is the DEP wants you to evaluate all wells that you identify, except monitoring wells, within a half mile of the site. And then within 1 mile of the site, they want you to evaluate irrigation wells, industrial wells, and wells with water allocation permits. That's the 5-mile radius search. And then the other more applicable radii, you have 500-foot radius. They want you to really focus on wells that are within 500 feet of the extent of groundwater contamination if you don't know which way groundwater flow is. If you do know which way groundwater flow is, it's 250 feet up gradient and then 500 feet side gradient and down gradient. These are the radii where the DEP really wants you to evaluate the wells that are within this extent of your groundwater flow. Next slide, please. Now, there is another radii. Whether or not it's applicable, we can argue about, but there is a DEP well search guidance document. It's actually called Well Search eTools Instructions from November of 2011. A link is provided. This document is not on the SARA guidance page. And if you don't say Well Search eTool Instructions, you will not find it. If you just type in DEP Well Search Guidance on Google, you will have a bear of a time finding this. In this document, it references a radii of 1,000 feet. Now, for those of us who've been in the business a little bit longer, know that a 1,000-foot radius was one of the radii referenced in one of the prior versions of the technical regulations. But this well search e-tools guidance, which is still the active guidance for well searches in New Jersey, specifically references a 1,000-foot radius as well. Okay, so basically, this 1,000-foot radius, basically, if you have an atlas sheet coordinate or a focus search area that is within or partially within 1,000 feet of the site, you should additionally evaluate this well. And I have an example on the next slide. Okay, so I hope this comes forward. I know this might be a little small for everyone. My apologies. This is a screenshot of one of my well searches. I have the property boundary here in this aqua light blue color, the 200-foot, 50-foot radius in this dark red, the 500-foot radius in the orange, and the 1,000-foot radius in yellow. Okay, I have the atlas sheet coordinate or focus search area highlighted in red, and then I have this well here circled in green. All right, so you might look at this and go, well, this is beyond 1,000 feet of the extent of the groundwater plume. I don't have to evaluate this well. Well, not really. What happens is this well is located within this atlas sheet coordinates, and a portion of this atlas sheet coordinate is within 1,000 feet of the site. Therefore, this well here, circled in green, is in fact a well that you want to additionally evaluate as part of your receptor evaluation. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, water purveyors. Keep in mind, knowing that the area is on public water is a line of evidence that a receptor may not be impacted, or there might not be receptor impacts, but it is only a line of evidence. It's not the line of evidence. So even if you know your area is on public water, you still have to do all the extra steps to confirm that there are no wells. Next slide. Now, to find the water purveyors, once again, GeoWeb under the water tab, there's a click box for purveyor. We have a screenshot of the extent of water purveyors as prevented on New Jersey GeoWeb. What you'll notice is large portions of the state are indicated as not being on public water. So we're all very used to think of New Jersey as a very urban state. Lots of areas either are or may not be covered by public supplies. Next slide. All right, so now that you have all this information, you've put it all together, now you plop it on a figure. This is, once again, a screenshot of one of my more complicated well searches. You can see the radii, the property boundary, the wells, wellhead protection areas, etc. So this is the type of figure that the DEP wants to see attached to the receptor evaluation. I will say, as I said before, this is probably the most complicated well search site that I have. Most well search figures are not this complicated. Next slide. Okay, now that all this information is plotted, you can begin to identify the wells you need to additionally evaluate, and you can request the well documents like the well permit and well record from the DEP. As I noted before, some of these well records are available for download from New Jersey Data Miner, but the coverage is spotty and incomplete. The easiest way is to just provide a list of well permit numbers and email it to the DEP requesting the well documents associated with it. The email address you send it to is on the screen, and once again, I have some template language that I use. You do not need to sit there and use this language. You can use your own language, but this language works very well for me. And essentially, you just send that information, list of wells, a list of well permit numbers. They'll get back to you very quickly with the well documents. If you have a very long list, you are allowed to attach an Excel file that has the well permit numbers listed. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to go over how you evaluate the information on well documents. Okay, so you get the well permit, the well record, well abandonment report, etc. We're going to go over each one of these bullets in more detail, but you obviously can get the address of the well. Keep in mind that a lot of these well documents will include the owner address and the property and the well address. They're not necessarily the same. A lot of people will focus on the owner address and not notice that the well is at a different address. These documents will include the block and lot. You can get current information from the Registry of Deeds. You can even do it even if the block and lots have changed over time. Some Registry of Deeds allow you to put in old lots and blocks, and then they'll tell you what the new blocks and lots are. You can get the owner name from the Registry of Deeds if you need that. The municipality and county are on these documents. Note that I'm quite shocked sometimes how wrong this is, that they can get the wrong city and wrong county, but it happens. Once again, the Atlas sheet coordinate will be put on there. Once again, the atlas sheet coordinate can be very wrong again. You got to be aware of this. And there'll be a sketch or a figure sometimes. So we're going to go over these in more detail. Next slide. Okay, so this is an example, okay, of how you would correct the location of a well, or more accurately locate the well, based from, say, this driller's sketch on a well permit or well record. Okay, this is an example of one that I have done. The well's approximately at the intersection of Westfield Avenue, New Jersey, Route 25. I did what everyone did. I went to Google Earth, typed in that address, and Google says, I don't know what you're talking about. I had to do some sleuthing, and I eventually found out that there's no more, that New Jersey Route 25 doesn't exist anymore. It's been co-opted. It is now US 130. Thank you very much, Wikipedia. So using that information, I was able to find out where the intersection of Westfield Avenue and US 130 was, and therefore I was able to relocate the well reasonably accurately with that information. Next slide. Now, how do you handle contradictory information or errors in the well documents? Document it in a table and in the well search spreadsheet. We're going to discuss this later. If it's a very important well where the records are wrong and you really need to point home that this well either is or is not a receptor, you may want to discuss it in more detail in your milestone document for additional clarification. This type of level, though, is really reserved for wells that are potential receptors, something very important, something that really needs that additional level. You don't have to do it for every single well. Next slide. Okay, so here's an example. We have the well record on the right. I have a blow-up of the well record on the lower left. This is an example of a well that was proximate to the site and was coded as a domestic well. The well record was obtained, and then when you looked at the quality of the water, it said salty. So obviously this well is not a potable well and is not used for potable consumption. Next slide. Now, if there is a mistake, what should you do? Now, we all know that if anyone who's done a well search already knows very well that the DEP's database, the information you get off of line, the well records, well permits, a lot of this information is very wrong. The DEP does not expect you to correct every single error. We'd all go crazy. But critical wells, wells that you would think are receptors or that you don't think are receptors, that people think may be receptors, wells that are within the critical trigger distances, these are the wells where you really want to try and correct these mistakes. So once again, you contact the Bureau of Water Allocation and Well Permitting at the email address on the screen. You submit that information to them, then convert it to a PDF and attach it to your receptor evaluation so that you have that record that you attempted to make the change. You do not need to confirm that the DEP has made the change for you. You just need to put in the effort that you've made, that you have attempted or informed the DEP of the error that needs to be corrected. Next slide. How do you document these things? You got a figure, a table. An example of the table is provided below, which is basically the permit number, well use, document, etc. I have 3 of the columns highlighted in red, circled in red. We're going to talk about that later. When you attach the well documents, once again, these are the permits, the records, well abandonment reports, please try and create some sort of organization to them. I'm sure we have all gotten well searches and they attach the well documents and it's just a haphazard mess. There's no organization at all. Try and create some sort of organization to it. I typically just put it in ascending permit number. Works very well, but if there's some other organization that makes sense to you, but please try and organize them. Don't just take them as a haphazard mess and attach it to the end of your well search. Next slide. All right, we're finally past question 7. We're now on sub-question 7. Date of the most recent or updated well search. A lot of people get confused by this. A lot of people will put it as the date they finished their well search. That's not really the case. It's actually the date when you downloaded the XY well search information from New Jersey Data. That is the date. So if you download that information on September 1st, but you don't finish your well search until October 15th, it would be September 1st because that's the day you downloaded the information from DEP Data. Next slide. Question 8, is a completed well search spreadsheet or historical well search table attached and has an electronic copy of the spreadsheet been submitted to that email address? So where do you find the spreadsheet? Here's an example of the Sarah Forms page. The well search spreadsheet as an Excel file is circled in red. Download it from there. Next slide, please. Now, how do you fill it out? There are instructions, link provided, but the well search spreadsheet has 2 tabs. One's called the case info tab, and the other is called the well search info tab. The screenshot I have for tab 2 is truncated. I couldn't fit all the columns on there, so keep in mind that there's much more information than just what you're seeing on the screen. Next slide. The case info tab, all case info tab fields are mandatory. They're all shown here on the screen. I'm not going to go through them all, just a couple of things. For the source coordinate X and source coordinate Y, remember X is the easting and Y is the northing. A lot of people get those reversed. Please be careful. For the author name, it's the name of the company, not the person's name. It's the company's name. And then for street address, put it all in one line, just like you would if you're writing a letter or in an email. Keep in mind, once again, it is the company address. For those of you who work from home, no one's asking for your home address. Next slide. Okay, so for the well search info tab, the first 17 blank columns are meant to accommodate information from the XY well search query. This is from DataMiner. And then as you modified it based on the information in the well search eTools, okay, you paste the entire query without no values from potentially potable column right in that spreadsheet, okay? And then what you'll do is you'll update the XY coordinates depending on whether or not you've moved any of the wells based on the information in the well documents, and you update any other information as appropriate. I will say I don't normally update other information as appropriate, but if for some reason you access the well, for some reason you gauged it, and the record says that it's 200 feet deep, and you gauge it and you find out it's 250 feet deep, that would be an example of you updating that information. Next slide. For the well search info tab, many fields, but not all, are mandatory. The mandatory fields are provided below. I'm not going to go through them all, but they're on the screen listed for you. I do want it where coordinate method is in red because we're going to talk about it more. For coordinate method, there's a drop-down menu, screenshot on the center of the slide, shows you the various methods, how you can update the coordinates. We're going to go through all of these. And then, of course, the status also has a drop-down menu if the well is active, inactive, sealed, whatever. Next slide. Okay, so coordinate method. I'm sorry the graphic might be too small. My apologies. This is how you update the locations of the wells from the information from the well documents, well permit, well record. Okay, and we're going to go through it very quickly. You have the approximate address match. Okay, this is the address field found on the permit or the well record. The well's located here. It's located at 123 Elm Street. Well, that's where the well is located. Okay, that's the approximate address match method. Digital image, that's the driller sketch. You place the well at the location indicated approximately from the driller sketch. GIS parcel centroid, you know the block and lot. You put the well at the center of the block and lot. Not really rocket science. The only time that you vary from this is if you have a very large parcel. Then you would sheet the well to be closer to the residential structure at the property. GPS, these are XY coordinates from a GPS unit. This is not from a surveyor. So you might go in the field and you have a portable GPS device and you read off the XY coordinates. That's GPS. It's not surveyed locations. Property location hard copy. This is badly named in my opinion. Basically, it's the Atlas sheet coordinates. Okay, we mentioned before the DEP put on a grid before they did the New Jersey State Plane coordinates. You have the Atlas sheet coordinate grid across the state. What they did is they take the Atlas sheet coordinates and then they convert them to XY coordinates either at the center of the Atlas sheet coordinate or at the corner of the Atlas sheet coordinate. I'm sure many of you have conducted well searches and then noticed all the wells form a very nice grid across, a very nice and regular grid across the entire area. That's because all the wells were coded via their Atlas sheet coordinates converted to the center for XY coordinates. There's other unknown. I've never used this, but if there's some other methodology, or you just don't know, use that option. And then survey from a benchmark. This is from a New Jersey licensed surveyor. So you have a well, the New Jersey licensed surveyor comes out, gives you a Form B. That's when you use survey from the benchmark. Next slide, please. You'll then submit the well search spreadsheet via email to the email address listed. The subject line will be the PI number without literally putting in PI number, comma, space, WRS. So for example, if the PI number is 013164, the subject line will be 013164, comma, WRS. And then the information below that is the information they want to see in the email. So copy and paste that in your email, put in the information as appropriate. You don't have to add anything else. You literally only need that. If you send in these things, you've now met your requirements for submitting your receptor evaluation spreadsheet, well search spreadsheet. Next slide, please. When you name the Excel file, the DEP has a way you like to name it. It's basically the PI number of the site, the date of submission, and WRS. So once again, as an example, you have a PI number of 013164 and the submittal date of May 13, 2010. The X file name is going to be 013164 underscore 05 for May, 13th for the 13th day, and 10 for 2010, WRS. That is the name of your well search spreadsheet that you send to the state. Next slide, please. Now, what does the DEP do with these well search spreadsheets? I actually didn't know until we did this training, but what I learned is the well search spreadsheet is used by the DEP as part of the receptor evaluation inspection process. The DEP reviews the well search to ensure that the well search is completed, if there are wells within trigger distances, and if so, if the wells were properly addressed. The spreadsheet is not submitted to update the DEP's database. So for many of you who go, I've submitted 3 well search spreadsheets, and I'm always moving this well, and every single time I do an updated well search, that well's still at the same place. They don't use it for that. It is to document that the LSRP conducted the well search and is taking appropriate next steps. Next slide. Question 9, are any potable or irrigation wells located within a half mile of the currently known extent of contamination? You'll get these results from the DEP Data Miner XY well search and the 5-mile radius search. And then, of course, the question is, how do you verify or ground truth these well locations and uses? When do you need to ground truth these locations? Basically, it's LSRP judgment, but we've got some examples. Next slide. You can contact the property owner and ask. Contact the local public water purveyor. Does the property get a bill? Proof that the well was installed, well permit, and well record. Now, we all know there are situations when the only evidence you have that a well was installed was that the well permit is available, but you don't have the well record. Is this a line of evidence that the well wasn't installed? It is a line of evidence, but it can't be your only line of evidence. It's certainly not proof. Next slide. You can get creative. This was an example someone sent to me, which I greatly appreciate. This is Google Earth Street View. And somebody wanted to know whether or not a property was on public water. The Google Earth Street View literally included one call marking showing water entering the site. So that's certainly a pretty good piece of evidence that that property is supplied by public water. Next slide. What if potable wells are confirmed within prescribed radii? Well, provide all available information on that potable well with each receptor evaluation, the initial, the updated, etc. If potable well sampling is conducted, provide a data summary for all potable well sampling results with each receptor evaluation. Now note, the DEP wants to see all the results, including the historic results. They don't want you referring back to old receptor evaluations, but you only need to provide a data summary, not the full laboratory data package with receptor evaluation. Although you still need to submit the full laboratory data deliverables form, which is a separate form. Next slide. What if there is a tier 1 wellhead protection area or public potable supply well within prescribed radii? You can use sampling conducted by the purveyor. It doesn't have to be your own sampling. Ideally, you want to evaluate data for raw water that comes directly from the well without treatment. It's helpful to review treated or service water to assess whether or not receptors are being impacted, but you still want to be able to review raw water that comes directly out of the public well. Now, if you have impacts to raw water from your site, but the treated water is clean that goes to the public, do you still have an IEC? Yeah, you do. You still have an IEC. And then you would still have to submit an IEC, call in an IEC, and do all the steps necessary as part of an IEC. But the PRCR would probably likely just be responsible for taking over the cost of the treatment for the contaminants of concern that they're impacting that well. And they would still have to do all the other IEC requirements. But the idea that you would have to provide additional drinking water sources, that stuff will probably not come into play. Next slide.
All right, we have our next test your knowledge question. Next slide. Poll question number 2. If there is contamination in untreated water from a potable supply well, but treated water is clean, do you have an IEC condition? Your answer options are A, yes, and B, no. We'll give you about a minute to answer this. Remember, if you are looking to get continuing education credits, make sure to answer the poll questions. I know it's been mentioned in the chat or in the questions that where the slides can be found, and the slides and the training recording will be made available in the coming weeks in our training page. I'll also send the link in the chat. Looks like we have about 10 seconds left to answer this question. All right, and the answer is A, yes.
All right, moving on. What if there's an irrigation well within prescribed radii? Well, you have to confirm whether or not it is possible to drink from the irrigation well. Do you need to conduct a well inspection? Is the well hooked up directly to irrigation equipment? Is the irrigation well a standalone well with a faucet? All these things that would speak to whether or not that irrigation well could or is used for potable supplies. Depending on the results of the evaluation of the irrigation well, may be required to conduct sampling of the irrigation well. Additionally, the LSRP may make a recommendation that irrigation wells not be installed within a CEA area, but it's not required. The default CEA language says no potable wells, but if you're in an area and an irrigation well is being used to water crops with contaminated water, you might want to sit there and put that type of restriction on your CEA. Next slide, please. What if there's an industrial well within prescribed radii? Now, normally the DEP is not concerned with industrial wells, so normally sampling is not required. But you have to use your professional judgment. You can't simply discount industrial wells. Is the pumping of the industrial well, can it affect groundwater flow? Can it cause a vapor issue? I had a site where an industrial well was installed proximate to one of the sites I was the LSRP on, and it fed to a car wash. Certainly could potentially create a vapor issue there. Is the water used for food consumption? Is the water used to make ice? Does the facility that has that industrial well, does it have an Nagibity permit? And all of a sudden it's creating a migration pathway of contamination to an environmentally sensitive natural resource. So you can't just discount industrial wells. Next slide. Door-to-door survey. For sub-question 9, a door-to-door survey is required in accordance with that regulation, which basically says if there are any potable or irrigation wells within 1/2 mile of each point of groundwater contamination, conduct a door-to-door survey to determine the existence of any unpermitted potable or irrigation wells. Note that the purpose of a door-to-door survey is to evaluate for unpermitted wells. You're not looking for wells that are permitted and in the DEP system. You're looking for wells that are not in the DEP system. Next slide. Okay, so what constitutes a door-to-door survey? The DEP touched on this earlier in the presentation. According to Receptor evaluation, frequently asked questions, then provided it's not an actual door-to-door survey. The updated regs, we're going to remove door-to-door survey wording. There's issues with confusion or safety issues. The DEP does not want you randomly knocking on people's doors. Next slide. The well survey questionnaires, which we'll touch on later, should be sent to all properties, the owners and the tenants, if they're not the same people, via certified mail and standard mail. This is to encourage the maximum response to your questions on the presence of unpermitted wells. A follow-up inquiry or mailing should occur with any property owner that did not respond to the well survey. So you do a door-to-door survey once, you get a response of, say, 60%. The next 40%, you will need to make another attempt. Next slide. What should be in the questionnaire? It's at the discretion of the LSRP. Does it say, please contact me so we can talk? Does it ask point blank if you have a well? Does it ask if you have a water bill? Any other information you feel that may be necessary or appropriate for your well survey. There's no standard format. Next slide. Multiple lines of evidence may be provided to demonstrate that no further evaluation is needed into if responses are not obtained. So it's really unlikely that you'll get 100% response to your door-to-door survey. So therefore, the DEP recognizes this. So what are some ways that you can decide that you've done enough effort with a property that hasn't gotten back to you? You can get records from the water purveyor demonstrating that the property is receiving public water. You can contact the local and county health departments. Records for well construction details or as-built drawings if they have them, or well abandonment reports. Next slide. Groundwater flow direction, is this property upgrading or down gradient? The plume dimensions or delineation, I know how big my plume is, it's not reaching this property. Or the depth of groundwater contamination, I have an oil release and this well's 200 feet deep, etc. Next slide. Local information on potable well construction in the area, the depth of the well screen, depth of groundwater, a street inspection. You can see if they have, if there's a water shutoff on the sidewalk, indicating that they receive public supplies, or other sources like Google Earth that we discussed earlier in this report, in this presentation. And when you're done, you attach the results of the door-to-door survey to your receptor evaluation, or if you're submitting as a milestone report like an RIR, attach it as Appendix C to the report. Next slide. Here's another sub-question on 9. Identify if any of the following conditions exist based on the well search and door-to-door survey. Yes or no, are there potable wells within 500 feet, 250 feet, or Tier 1 wellhead protection areas? Just check based on the results of your well search. Next slide. Has sampling been conducted for the potable wells and or non-potable wells? Okay. Yes or no? Did you do it or not? Reasons why you might not have sampled. Once again, extent of the plume. Does it reach this well? Depth of the well versus depth of groundwater impact. Timing of release. Is it recent or is it historic? Or any other applicable information or LSRP knowledge. Next slide. Okay, so you sampled a potable well once and there were no exceedances of the groundwater quality standards. Does this mean you're done monitoring this well? Maybe, but maybe not. Under what conditions might you be required to sample more than once? Your source is not fully delineated or remediated. The plume is not fully defined. The plume may be expanding. There might be a new release, or there might be other data gaps. So it all depends on your specific circumstances at your site. Next slide. Question 11, has contamination been identified in potable wells not attributed to background conditions above the Class 2 groundwater quality, groundwater remediation standards, or state safe drinking water levels? Okay, so this is obviously a yes or no, you sampled it, is there contamination or not? But the main takeaway from this slide is, if you're sampling a potable well, there's a very real chance that you might have an IEC or an immediate environmental condition. So before you even sample, you need to be prepared and plan ahead. Is there a chance that the potable well is impacted above the groundwater quality standards? Then you're going to enter into then you're going to have an IEC per the IEC requirements in the Tech Regs 1.11. The IEC guidance page is a link is provided. Remember, IEC timeframes are short. You have to contact the DEP immediately, and you have 5 days to submit an interim response action. So before you sample a potable well, be prepared to move fast. Next slide. The sub-question on 11, provide the date of the laboratory data package was received. It's basically the date of the final laboratory data package. So we all know we get draft results. We talked when we were making this presentation. It is the date of the final laboratory data package. Note that the full laboratory data deliverables form is still required. Many people who've been in the business a while may remember the potable well indoor air sampling reform that you were supposed to submit 7 days prior to sampling a potable well or indoor air. So you might go, do we still need this form? No, it's an old form, don't need it. Ignore it. And there's another sub-question for 11. Has an engineered response action been completed on all impacted receptors? If that applies to you, and we're not going to go through on how to address engineered system responses, but if you have that, provide a brief description. Next slide. Has contamination been identified in non-potable wells not attributed to background conditions above the groundwater remediation standards? An industrial well, did you sample it for whatever reason? Remember, industrial well, if it's used for potable supplies and it's not an industrial well, it is a potable well, okay? That industrial well may use most of its water for whatever its industrial operations, but then it might run a line over to the drinking fountain. It's now a potable well. Also irrigation wells or any other wells that were sampled. This does not include monitoring wells. The DEP is not asking about your site monitoring wells. They're asking about non-monitoring wells, irrigation wells, industrial wells, potable wells, etc. That's what pertains to question 12. Next slide, please. Sub-question 12, if yes, provide the date the laboratory data package was received. It's the date of the final laboratory data package from the laboratory. Not the date you get the draft results, it's the date you get the final lab package. Next slide. And I think this is our last slide. Question 13, has the groundwater use evaluation been completed? Well, what are your conclusions? Do you think you're done? Are your conclusions defensible? That's something you need to ask yourself, and whether or not you can defend them if you're challenged. Remember, if there are unresolved potential groundwater receptors, you can't check yes. If there's, well, I think I'm almost done, but there's this well here and I just can't get access, guess what? You can't check now. Like you really have to have it buttoned up. And I think that's it. Next slide. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Joe. Up next, we have Kathy Stetzer, and she's going to talk about Section F of the Receptor Evaluation Form.
Thanks very much. Hi guys, I'm Kathy Stetzer. I am a geologist at GEI Consultants and obviously also an LSRP. I also sit on the state licensing board, so it's important for me to say that the opinions today are my own and not those of the board. So probably some people agree with me. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to Vapor Intrusion, Section F. It's not very long. But a lot of work goes into making sure that that form and all the work behind it has been completed. So next slide. We're going to jump right in. So the first question is, do you have a reason? Do you have a trigger to do a vapor intrusion investigation? And then question number one is multi-part, kind of finding out what that trigger is. It could be more than one thing. It's going to change as your report, as you continue your investigation. As was mentioned by all the other speakers, this is a living document that's going to change. All the sections may change as you get more data. So in the very beginning, you're in this section, and is there a condition that triggers a VI investigation? I've put some time frames in blue just because sometimes they get confusing. 150 days from the time you identify whatever that trigger is to starting that investigation. So it seems like a lot of time, but if you're trying to get access and get vendors scheduled, it can take a long time. So make sure you get right on that. And then the questions want you to put in the date that you first identified the condition. So you just go down the line. Do you have groundwater contamination above the vapor intrusion groundwater screening level? That's usually the first thing any of us find. Remember that there's radius for that. If it's petroleum-based, gasoline, diesel fuel, heating oil, stuff like that, it's 30 feet. If it's a solvent, non-petroleum hydrocarbons, which usually we're looking at solvents, it's 100 feet. For good reason. Most of my sites are solvent sites, and you don't need much solvent in groundwater to get an indoor air problem. I think it's less frequent that when you have low concentrations, like benzene is going to trigger it. But anyway, remember you've got the two trigger distances. Same trigger for free product. 30 feet for petroleum, 100 feet for non-petroleum hydrocarbons, such as solvents. Next slide. Then this is still question one. As you're getting further along in your investigation, maybe you've got soil gas that exceeds that triggered it in indoor air. Maybe you've got indoor air that was above the standard. You're just going to check yes and put the date in that you first identified that condition. Less common, but certainly possible, wet basements with sumps that have, your groundwater's dirty and now it's gotten into your basement. It's, off-gassing in your basement, either from a wet floor or a sump. That would count. You may find that first. That may be the first thing that gets you hired is my basement stinky. In which case you'd move to this vapor intrusion investigation sooner. Methane generating conditions. If you've got a site next to a landfill is where I think you'd probably find something like that. I've never had this, but that would be another reason to conduct a vapor intrusion investigation. And then there's other weird stuff like elemental mercury, which volatilizes, very dangerous. Unsaturated soil impact. I don't know how often that happens, but I could envision having a bunch of gross stuff stuck up underneath your building that could be volatilizing into your structure. If every answer is no, then you skip to section G. That doesn't mean you skip to section G for the rest of your life because some of these conditions may change. So ask yourself these questions every time you're doing the receptor evaluation submission. Next slide. All right, question 2. Have you delineated your groundwater to the vapor intrusion screening level, groundwater screening level? Usually we haven't done that until we get to the RI. Sometimes we haven't even done that until we get to the RA. So usually you've just got a couple data points and you know you're exceeding the standard, but maybe you're using interpolation, extrapolation, modeling to tell you how big your plume is, but you haven't actually got the point of compliance wells. So for much of your investigation, this answer may be no, because you just haven't gotten there yet. Doesn't mean you don't still have to address it, but you might not have that point of compliance. 3, did you use any site-specific or alternate screening levels or standards? You want to say yes or no here. You must get pre-approval if you're going to use an alternate soil gas or indoor air standard. So you're already going to be meeting with the DEP, submitting that to them. If you're doing an alternate groundwater screening level, they recommend you come in and talk to them anyway, which is a good idea, because if you're going to, do your own standard, you don't want to find out after you've already submitted your report and your timeframes are almost up that they don't like the way you did it. So just talk to them. It can't hurt. And I just put this bullet in here. It doesn't necessarily go with these 2 bullets above, but it could. But if you're doing any variants or deviations that involve the receptor evaluation, make sure you're clearly documenting that in your key phase report so that everybody knows what your scientific lines of evidence are, why you feel what you've done is protective. I know we sound like a broken record with that, but LSRPs have the ability to use our independent professional judgment. We need to do it wisely and we need to document it carefully. 4 is something that the DEP says they sometimes don't get. Joe just talked to you about how doing, the GIS maps for the well search and for the initial site use, you're going to use that same map. So do a good job with it the first time and then just keep layering things on top of it. So they're going to want to see a map that shows the radius, 30 feet for petroleum hydrocarbons, 100 feet for solvents or other non-petroleum hydrocarbons on that map. So that's how you're going to tell where you need to do additional vapor investigation sampling. Another thing that people get wrong, and even when people were reviewing my slides, they're like, no, this isn't right. I'm like, no, I think it is. Once you identify an IEC or a VC, we'll talk about that a little later, but I'll just mention it now too. You got to do step outs from that, and it's always 100 feet. That 30 feet for petroleum hydrocarbons goes away as soon as you find a VC or an IEC. Then you're using 100 feet when you're doing your next step out for IECs or VCs. We'll talk about it a little more later. Next slide. Okay, so I made up a fake site, and I made these slides myself so they don't look super professional, but you'll get the point. This is actually a CVS in my hometown. This is not a contaminated site, but we're going to pretend it's an old dry cleaner. So the pink is the site, blue is all residential, and orange is commercial. So here's my land use map. Next slide. Here's my initial data. We went out, we put in some wells, we did some well points, whatever. The groundwater screening level for PCE, which is what we're dealing with because it was dry cleaner, and that's what we're finding, is 36 ppb. So you can see we have 4 wells that exceed that. We've got 1 well right under where the dry cleaning machine was. It's 1200. Then we have some other wells. 255 is where they stored their drums, the 125, and then 56 over in that corner. So we've got 4 wells that exceed the 36 ppb. So we're just going to put a 100-foot circle around it, right? Next slide. Don't do that. This is wrong. I just put a 100-foot circle around every well that exceeded, but none of those wells are 36 ppb. They're much higher than that. So that actual 36 contour line is not represented here. Now, maybe you'd get lucky and it would be. Like I tried a couple of iterations and every time the incorrect ended up looking like the correct, but here it's not. Let's go to the next slide. So if you draw 100-foot circles around your wells, you only trigger 1 off-site vapor intrusion investigation. That's the only place those 100-foot circles touched. But, next slide. If you do it correctly, This is not a pretty figure. It's the best I could do. But look at that. The dashed yellow line is approximate isoconcentration line for 36 ppb. So we looked at gradient and we extrapolated or interpolated, I don't remember which one it is. The DEP says one and I say the other, so I'm saying both. But you've extrapolated where that 36 line is likely to be. Now you're going to eventually need to have point of compliance wells to be done. But for now, this is what you're going to do to get the best science you can to figure out where you need to sample. Then we stepped out 100 feet from that. Go to the next slide, please. Hey, look at all the houses I need to sample and commercial properties. When I did it wrong, it was just one. And when I did it correctly, it's all of these. It really, really matters. And that's something that the DEP sees all the time. So people just draw a circle and they're like, oh, it's fine. It's really not. You need to do it correctly. And then you need to keep adjusting that as you get more data. Maybe the plume is bigger than you think. So anyway, this is the right way to do it. Always remember that. Don't just let somebody put a circle around a well. Next slide. So another thing that comes up, we had a clean well that was 4 ppb between the site and that one lower corner property. Well, I've got a clean well between me and this house, so that means I don't need to sample this house. No, not correct. You still need to sample because, next slide, please. You look down in the bottom corner, there's that red box, that's the house. The green line, which is the 100-foot extrapolation, crosses that house. That's what matters. Not your groundwater data being clean next to the house, because you're thinking about how vapor moves through the subsurface. So as soon as the vapor gets in the subsurface, it moves in all the directions, not just the direction of groundwater flow. So you can't say, I got a clean one next to the house I don't need. You could say, I got a clean well 100 feet from the house in the direction of your plume. I've never seen this, but the DEP says they do see this all the time. So just put it out of your mind that the clean well next to the house does nothing for you. It's that 100-foot buffer you need to look at. Okay, that horse has been beaten. Next slide. Oh, it's test your knowledge. All right, everybody wake up.
We have our third test your knowledge question. Next slide, please. All right, VI trigger distances are applied from A, the monitoring well location, B, the AOC boundary, or C, the edge of the groundwater plume based on linear interpolation of data. You have about a minute to answer this. And just a reminder that any questions that we don't get to today will be answered in the coming weeks via email. So don't worry if we didn't get to any of your questions today.
And I know everybody got this right because I just gave you a bunch of really fancy figures that showed the answer.
All right, you have about 10 seconds, so make sure you are voting, especially if you want CECs for this training. Next slide, please. And the answer is C.
Thanks, Alyssa. Okay, moving on. Question 5. Is a VI pathway a concern at or adjacent to the site? Obviously, in my example, the answer is yes, because I have data that show it. You may not be ready to say yes here. Maybe you're not there yet. So you're going to say no, and you're going to say why. Because clearly, if you've made it to section 5 or question 5, you've got a trigger. So if you're saying no, it's not a concern, it's got to be because I haven't done the thing yet to tell me if it's a problem. Or I can't do the thing because of this reason. So make sure you're telling them. If you did soil gas sampling, they want information about that. When did you get your lab data? Where were the exceedances identified? And if no, they want to know why. Usually, if you had a trigger and you didn't do soil gas, it's because there's a high water table, there's a dirt floor, there's an open crawl space. I mean, there might be reasons. Make sure you're telling them in as much detail as you think you need. Same for indoor air. Did you do your indoor air yet? What's your date? Where did you have exceedances? It could be no, or you're waiting for your lab data. So make sure you're being clear and then following the instructions. So we're moving on to question 8 because we've had indoor air, we have indoor air exceedances. So we've identified it, but it's not suspected to be from a discharge, which happens sometimes. It's okay for that to happen, but you need to talk about why. Usually it's because they're using the stuff in the building. Like they're still doing degreasing, or it's still a dry cleaner, or it's a gas station, or I don't know, whatever. But there's vats of it all over, so I'm not sampling inside because that's just silly. It's going to be dirty. Sometimes you're picking up ambient. I've picked up benzene in indoor air when I'm not even looking for benzene because there's a highway right next door. My ambient is screaming high with benzene. So there could be reasons. It doesn't happen that much, but there could be reasons. Make sure you're talking about it. A lot of times you're talking about gradient. So make sure if it's a gradient thing, make sure you're giving that data and explaining your technical lines of reasoning. Next slide. So here's your IEC and VC page. So question 9, do you have an IEC? Which means you have an exceedance of the rapid action level. They want to know when the lab package was received. They want to know if you've submitted your IEC response action form, which is due in 14 days from when you confirm your data. And did you do your engineering system response? That's due in 60 days. So that's why these timeframes are really tight. Once you get that data, you need to already be thinking about if it's an IEC, if it's a VC, what's my next step? Because you don't have that much time. Same thing for VCs. You get a little more time for your responses, but there's still some pretty tight timeframes, particularly for that initial form. Next slide. All right, do one or more buildings have an indeterminate VI pathway? So that's going to be one of those places where usually it's because they're using the stuff inside. So I didn't complete my vapor intrusion investigation because it's just going to, so if you've got this indeterminate pathway because it's still a dry cleaner, you're going to say why. And then you're required to do annual inspections to make sure it's still a dry cleaner and didn't turn into a daycare. I personally like to know a little sooner than annual if there's the potential it could change to a more sensitive end use. I mean, some places are just zoned industrial. It's going to take a year for them to not zone it industrial, so a year is probably safe. But think about it. If you know that this is a community where they're trying to get more stores or houses or things like that, make sure you're checking. Because you don't want to show up at a site a year later and be like, oh my goodness, there's been little kids in here for 8 months. Now, one would think the Madden Act would catch that, but you never know. So, enough on that. Has the VI investigation been completed? Like, are you done? Usually, the answer is going to be no because you're still working on it. Until you get to the very end when you actually are done the investigation. You're going to want to attach justification. For me, a lot of it's like, well, I'm subject in excess, or I'm waiting to collect more samples, or I don't have point of compliance wells yet. It's really common to answer no to this. Just have a good reason. Next slide. All right, so the next slide, what does it mean for your VI investigation to be done? Like, what does that actually mean? So you can say yes. All groundwater has been delineated to the vapor intrusion screening level. You've done all your soil gas sampling, subgrade utilities, structures. You've made it all the way to all your trigger distances. You've done your step out sampling if needed, and you've notified the state and the property owners. So it's really not any different than the things you need to do to understand if you've finished any kind of investigation. You've delineated, you've done all the steps, and you've notified the proper people. Then check yes. Okay, next slide. So do we have any questions we could go over for me or Joe while we're waiting?
There is a question. Let's see.
I have a question. It's just me.
Oh, you have a question?
I typed in a
read
question
a couple
for Joe.
questions. Okay, so our first question is, please confirm that an updated well search is not required when performing an updated RE if there are no longer groundwater exceedances of the groundwater quality standards.
Joe?
I'm going to let the DEP handle that one. I would say
I think that's wise.
it doesn't seem like it should be required, but I'd like to have the DEP chime in.
Hello. Yes, if the groundwater quality standard, it's groundwater is below groundwater quality standards, you would not need to provide an updated well search with your URE.
Okay, thank you. All right. For section E, how do you answer if there is on-site groundwater which is delineated and a separate plume from off-site source which is not delineated?
I will once again allow the DEP to confirm this, but provided that you have demonstrated that these contaminants are not originating from your site via background investigation and a preliminary assessment per the technical regulations, and you've demonstrated that they are not related to your site, I would say that the well search should be done exclusively from your plume and your plume.
Only if you want to confirm.
Hello. Okay, so if you've proven that, yeah, it is an offsite source, if you've done the background investigation, issued the PA, yes, you can just do it from your plume. We would encourage you to issue an RIO for that offsite source just to kind of close out your liability and your obligations related to that. That's kind of an extra step that we would recommend, but yes.
What if a site does not have clean delineation points due to a commingled plume migrating from an offsite source? Excuse me. I thought I had to sneeze. Are we still supposed to check yes for delineation complete, or do we check no and attach a justification page?
Once again, I will let the DEP chime in, and I know commingled plumes can be very complicated. You will have to utilize the commingled plume guidance and attempt to delineate your plume to the best of your ability. Clean endpoint sampling, I think, would be better interpreted to mean endpoint sampling that has delineated your plume via the commingled plume guidance. I know that that's not necessarily the best answer, but if you have two plumes that are commingled and you feel confident that you have delineated your plume appropriately using multiple lines of evidence, and that you can put a box around your plume via sampling locations, I would say that would be the appropriate way to say that you, I would say that you should have in fact delineated your plume and that you can check yes for that.
Emily, if you want to confirm, or anyone else from DEP if you want to chime
in. Yeah, I would say yes to Joe's answer. It would be you want to confirm the delineation of your contribution to that commingled plume. So for the RI, that would be, you can use extrapolation to do that, but then by the RA, you would need point by point sampling of your contribution to the commingled plume.
So if it's commingled, you don't necessarily have to have clean endpoint samples, understanding that the plumes, but you have to have, I guess, as you said, Emily, endpoint samples that demonstrate via sampling, you know how big your component of the plume is.
All right, our next one. Is the 5-mile well search request always required in every well search, or is that triggered by a certain condition?
As far as I know, I do it for every single one of mine. I mean, you need to sit there and know if there are any wells with water allocation permits proximate and within prescribed radii of your plume. So yes. I do it as part of my updated too. It's really not as complicated as you think it is. Once you do it once, the next email you send 2 years later is almost identical. The wells are almost exactly the same anyways.
Perfect. Related question. How is the 5-mile well search different from the XY potentially potable well search on data miner, and why are both needed?
we'll let the DEP chime in on this, but I'm speculating that not all the wells with water allocation permits are readily available through the DEP's XY well search through data mine. And I can confirm that that's actually the case. Like when I've done an XY well search and on the 5 mile radius search, there have been wells indicated on the 5 mile radius search that were not obtained as part of the DEP's XY well search through data mine.
What is the definition of a lot of wells for the well document request where you can switch over to an Excel file?
I don't know. It all
That's a
depends
good one.
on at the point where you don't want to hand type it into your email anymore. I mean, if you
I would
want to
say
send
that's more of a personal answer.
yeah, and if you want to send them an Excel file that only has one well permit number on it, they're not going to bounce it back at you and go, "This isn't a lot." I mean, just whatever. If you're only interested in 1 well or 2 wells, you might just type the well permit numbers. But if you want to just attach them as an Excel file, do it that way. There's no right or wrong answer as long as you're giving the DEP the information.
Yeah, speaking from a general perspective, it's really what's easiest for you. If you find it easier to provide it on an Excel, we will accept the data, however you choose to provide it. Okay. If you have a potable well that requires sampling, do you need to resample the well for each well search update?
We covered this a little bit. It's based on the LSRP's professional judgment, but things that should feed that type of discussion or thought would be, is the plume adequately delineated? Is it expanding? Has the source been remediated? And there's no hard or fast answer on this. For example, if you sample the well as part of you identify the well as part of your initial well search activities, you sample the well, there are no impacts. But in the intervening 2 years, you've dug up the source and the source area concentrations are going down, the plume's shrinking, then maybe you decide you don't need to do it. It's really kind of based on the LSRP's professional judgment and what the circumstances at the site are. But as far as I know, and DEP, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no hard and fast series of criteria. It's very a site-by-site determination.
Thank you.
All right. I think our technical difficulties have been addressed. So, Kathy, if you want to come back and finish your presentation. I'm sorry about that, folks.
Sure, that's fine. We got the questions out of the way, so that's good. Next slide. There we go. Okay, so here's our site. And here's all the places that we needed to do VI sampling after we did our interpolation the correct way. Next slide. So what we ended up with is a vapor concern at the site and a vapor concern at an adjacent property, home. So what do we do now? This is where we do the 100-foot step outs. It would be the same if this were benzene or solvents. Oh, the same 100-foot radius. Next slide. So I put 100-foot boxes around my property. And you can see those 4 purple properties get picked up. The other ones we've already sampled. So if you look at the box around the site, the dry cleaner property, we've already done that sampling, but we did pick up 4 more across the street from that residential. And if you found another VC across the street in one of those purple boxes, you draw 100 feet radius around that one and step out again. Next slide. Luckily for us, they were all clean, and the only thing I would need to finish here is delineating my groundwater to the VI screening level in all directions. Then I would be able to say my VI investigation is complete. But we're done. Next slide, I think, is questions. Yes, thank you very much. Alyssa, do we have other questions?
We do have
Or
more
Jessica,
questions, but we have
whoever's
one more
watching, I don't know
presentation
who's watching.
first. Well, thank you
Wait,
so
there's
much,
somebody else.
Kathy.
Oh, all right. I'm gonna just stop talking.
And
Bye, guys. Thank
up
you.
next, thank you so much. Up next, we have Candace Speaker.
Next slide, please. Good morning, or I should say afternoon at this point. Right off the bat, I want to say that ecological receptors is a big, complex topic. In this training, we're not going to try and delve too deeply into how to conduct ecological investigations because we could really go down the rabbit hole. I would encourage you to seek out additional training if you're looking more for a how-to on completing ecological risk assessments and remedial investigations. Instead, we're going to be focusing on how to complete a good receptor evaluation with respect to ecological receptors. Step one is to make sure at the very least that you answer questions 1 through 4 in section G of the receptor evaluation form. In a nutshell, these are the overarching steps required to complete an ecological evaluation. Leaving any of these questions blank means that your receptor evaluation is not complete. If your receptor evaluation is not complete, then the phase document you've submitted it with is not complete. I've come across projects where the previous LSRP left these questions blank on the receptor evaluation form, and that's pretty much a one-way ticket to direct oversight. Don't do it. I think some practitioners are afraid of ecological evaluations because it can send you down a long and complicated road to site closure if you do have ecological issues at your site. However, ignoring it will not make it go away. This will come back to haunt you. Next slide, please. I'm including this excerpt from the LSRP Code of Conduct as a bit of a public service announcement. If your site has some ecological complexity to it, you want to make sure that you're consulting with someone who is qualified to do so. Many LSRPs, myself included, are not certified ecologists or trained in risk assessment. You want to make sure that if you're getting outside of your area of expertise on eco or any other issue at your site, that you're getting the appropriate assistance from other qualified professionals. Next slide, please. Okay, on to the specific questions in section G. Question 1, has an ecological evaluation been conducted? Again, we're not going to get into the weeds on specifics about ecological evaluations. Please refer to the Ecological Evaluation Technical Guidance for more information. But at the very least, for your receptor evaluation, you need to determine whether you have any environmentally sensitive natural resources on or near your site, and if you have contamination at your site above the ecological screening criteria. I just want to note that conducting an ecological evaluation does not necessarily lock you into additional sampling. If your ecological evaluation has been conducted, you can answer yes to question 1. If this is your initial receptor evaluation, you may need to answer no to question 1, and that's okay. Just make sure that your ecological evaluation has been completed by the time you're ready to submit your remedial investigation report if your site requires one. Questions 2, 3, and 4 go through the basic steps of completing an ecological evaluation. Next slide, please. So question 2, are any site-related contaminants above any ecological screening criteria? So you'll want to compare sample data from all media at your site, groundwater, soil, surface water, and sediment, to the ecological screening criteria. I've included a link here to the ecological screening criteria that you can use for future reference. Keep in mind that having sample data from your AOCs above the ecological screening criteria does not necessarily mean you have a complete pathway to an ESNR. Again, don't be afraid to answer the question. If you have no site-related contaminants above the criteria, then your ecological evaluation is complete. Next slide. And this takes us to poll question number 4.
Yes. All right, we have our last test your knowledge question. Poll question number 4. If there is site-related contamination above any ecological screening criteria, it means you have a completed pathway to an environmentally sensitive natural resource, or an ESNR. Answers are A, true, and B, false. We will give you about a minute to answer the poll. Remember again, if you're looking to get those continuing education credits, please make sure to answer these poll questions. We are getting near the end. Please, everybody, remember to do the survey. We do use them to try to make these trainings better. Got about 10 seconds left. All right, and the answer to poll question number 4 was B, false. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to question 3. Are there any ESNRs on or adjacent to your site or potentially impacted by site-related contamination? For the purposes of your ecological evaluation, you'd exclude groundwater as a potential ESNR. If you have potential impacts to groundwater, you should already be doing the appropriate investigation and documenting all of that in section E of the receptor evaluation. I've listed the definition of an ESNR from the tech regs here. This definition is found at 1.8a of the tech regs, but it refers back to itself at 1.8a, not super helpful. But there used to be a list of the different types of ESNRs that you might encounter, which was more helpful, and I'll get to that list in a minute. Next slide, please. So just want to note that the DEP has a whole bunch of GIS tools that you can use to help screen your site for ESNRs. At the very least, take a look to make sure that you can rule the various ESNRs out as potentially being on or adjacent to your site, or identify ESNRs that you should be looking more closely at. Next slide, please. So on this and the next slide, I've taken the list of ESNRs that used to be at 1.8a of the tech regs and provided sources of information to use in screening your site. Many of these are available in the various layers on GeoWeb. Others are available via those additional GIS resources from the department that I mentioned, and some, such as wildlife habitat, for example, may require you to apply for additional information from the New Jersey Natural Heritage Program or other departments. I'm not going to go over each of these exhaustively, but the department will eventually post these slides on their training website, and you can refer back to them. Next slide, please. So just a continuation of the list and the resources for screening. Keep in mind that these are just screening tools. Next slide, please. So hopefully you are familiar with GeoWeb, but here's where you can find the different layers up there on the top right. I know DEP is migrating to a new site for GeoWeb, but the various layers will still be able to be accessed in roughly the same top right location on the new website. Next slide, please. This is just a basic example of the various layers that are available on GeoWeb. Wetlands, shown here in blue, are found on the land layer on GeoWeb. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, here's an example of where you might need to apply to another department or program for more information about the ESNRs at or near your site. This is for natural heritage data. So just keep in mind, if you identify ESNRs, it may take a little work to be able to accurately screen your site for those ESNRs. Next slide, please. And as I've mentioned before, DEP has a good number of GIS tools for lots of things. The link here takes you to a website that you can use to access every single GIS layer that the DEP has developed. Next slide, please. This is just a screenshot of that website. It's searchable. You can search for any layers that you might be looking for. Now, if you've appropriately screened your site and you have no ESNRs on or near your site, then your ecological evaluation is complete. Again, if you're submitting your initial receptor evaluation, you may answer no to question 3, but make sure that you've properly evaluated your site for ESNRs by the time you're ready to submit your RIR. Next slide, please. Question 4, do any potential or complete migration pathways exist between contaminants of potential environmental concern and ESNRs, or did historic migration pathways exist? If you have both contaminants above the screening criteria and ESNRs in the vicinity, then you need to evaluate whether or not there's a pathway for your site contamination to impact those ESNRs. I've included a list here of some potential pathways, but this is by no means exhaustive. Don't forget that a complete pathway can include direct dumping, both current and historical, including historic outfalls. Check your historic aerial photos. If there's been significant filling or grading at your site, it may hide former features such as water bodies, wetlands, drainage swells, etc. Some common pathways include groundwater to surface water, overland flow or flooding, surface water to sediment. Evaluate whether there's any tidal activity, which could complete that pathway. Are there any other pathways that you can identify? Next slide, please. Question 5. If site-related free or residual product is or was present, does or did a potential or complete migration pathway exist to an ESNR? So you need to do the same evaluation for free or residual product that you did for your other site contaminants. Is there a pathway? Make sure you're looking at historical discharges and contamination, and this includes EPH above the applicable free product limit. Next slide, please. I've just included a few quotes from the tech regs regarding free and residual product in receptor evaluations. You need to evaluate for free residual product in all applicable environmental media. Additionally, for contaminants that are heavier than water, you'll want to evaluate whether you have concentrations above 1% of the water solubility for that contaminant. Next slide, please. Question 6, do the results of an ecological evaluation trigger a remedial investigation of ecological receptors? If you answered yes to questions 2, 3, and 4, you need to do a remedial investigation. If you answered yes to question 5 for free product, you need to do a remedial investigation. And I just want to note here that a remedial investigation for ecological receptors has the same time frame as the remedial investigation for the rest of your site. So if your eco starts to get hairy, make sure you're requesting the appropriate extensions to your time frame if you need it. Next slide, please. Okay, question 7. Do available data indicate an impact that is COPEX above the ecological screening criteria in ESNRs to ecological receptors, surface water, or sediment? The answer is yes. Then you need to conduct a risk assessment and or a remedial action in the ESNR. Again, make sure that you're involving someone who's qualified to conduct a risk assessment, and cleanup may or may not be a good idea in ESNRs. You want to make sure that you're not doing more damage than is necessary to your ecoreceptors, so make sure you're consulting with folks at DEP when you're moving ahead with something like this. Again, we don't want to get into the weeds, but just make sure you're being thorough. Next slide, please. Question 8. Have COPEX been fully delineated to the ecological screening criteria in your AOC, migration pathways, and ESNR? Remember, vertical and horizontal delineation apply just as it does to other AOCs, but make sure that you're collecting your samples properly. There may be differences in approach to sampling for ESNRs that you'll want to take into account. For example, you may only be worried about delineation in a biologically active zone. Next slide, please. And has an ecological risk assessment been conducted? Answer yes or no. Next slide, please. Question 10. If you have surface water bodies that are potentially impacted by site-related discharges, you want to provide the surface water body name and the requested information. Those names can be found on GeoWeb or another mapping tool, and the rest of the information can be found in the Surface Water Quality Standards rule. If your surface water body is an unlisted tributary, then provide the closest upstream branch that is listed in the Surface Water Quality Standards. Next slide, please. And this is just an excerpt from that list from the Surface Water Quality Standards. Next slide, please. Question 11. Has a PI or permit number been issued for any regulated areas by the Watershed and Land Management Program? For example, do you have delineated wetlands, wetland or riparian transition areas, flood hazard areas, etc.? If you do, then provide the applicable WLMP PI or permit number. Note that the name of this WLMP has changed. It's no longer, I guess, LERP. Next slide, please. Question 12. Are there any pending applications for WLMP jurisdiction letters or approvals under review by the DEP for the remediation? We take this to mean that it's applicable, but the permit or delineation letter just hasn't been issued yet. Hopefully it goes without saying that you're going to want to have any permits in hand before completing your RI. Next slide, please. Question 13, are there any valid WLMP jurisdiction letters or approvals under review by the DEP for the remediation? And I've just noted here that valid means not expired. Make sure that you're getting your updates or your renewals as necessary. Next slide, please. For more help with your ecological evaluations, we just listed the contact information for some of the eco folks, and you can refer back to this in the future. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I just wanted to refer back to Section C of the Receptor Evaluation Form. If you'll recall, Section C is newly added to the form to remind you of the supporting documentation that's required to be submitted with your receptor evaluations. So I've just highlighted a few things that are pertinent to supporting the answers to your questions in this specific section, Section G. Make sure that these things are either included in your accompanying phase report or attached to your receptor evaluation form when you submit it. And I think that brings me to the end. Next slide. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Candace. We appreciate it. We are now once more going to be taking some questions from the chat for about 10 minutes. If your question doesn't get answered at this time, someone from DEP will reach out by email to provide an answer to your question. Jumping back in, does the department view confirmation that a building is connected to municipal public water as proof that a well is not located on the property, even if there is an old well record?
They consider it a line of evidence. I actually am dealing with that situation right now. I have a permitted well that was installed at the property. I've gotten confirmation from the property owner that it exists, and I know full well that the property's on public water, but I still have to run it down and make sure whether or not that well is providing any potable service. So it is a line of evidence, and every site's a little different, but you need to do your due diligence on that.
Is a door-to-door survey required if the known extent of the impacted groundwater is limited to the site?
Well, you still have the applicable radii that the DEP wants you to conduct. The door-to-door survey, it's supposed to be if you already identify wells in the area through your XY well search and your 5-mile radius search, then you're supposed to do a door-to-door survey to look for unpermitted wells. And if the extent of your groundwater contaminant plume resides exclusively within the extent of your site, you still have to do your well search further rate from the applicable radii from the extent of your plume. And if any wells fall within that extent, you need to take appropriate action, whatever that is you're the LSRP. So, there's always caveats, there's always lines of evidence that the LSRP can utilize. If you feel that your lines of evidence allow you to not do a door-to-door survey, for example, your plume's highly localized, a very large property, for example, and there's no potential that none of your radii exist outside your subject property, then maybe you can make that argument. But as a general rule, if you're finding that wells were installed based on your XY well search, then you're supposed to do the door-to-door survey to look for unpermitted wells.
Thank you. All right. How long do those annual building inspections continue for?
Annual building inspections, is that for vapor or?
In fact,
Yeah,
Kathy, you asked this question.
The vapor.
Sorry, I was having trouble with my headset. What was the question on vapor?
You asked how long do those annual building inspections continue for?
Until you either sample or the building gets torn down? or you issue an RAO. I mean, yeah, I mean, forever until the plume's cleaned up.
Okay, this one's for Joe, it looks like. Are you finding wells on your 5-mile radius search that are not identified on your 1-mile XY radius search?
Yes, 100%, absolutely. I can give you examples, but not all the public supply wells with water allocation permits, for whatever reason, are showing up on my XY well search and vice versa. I'm absolutely finding, I mean, there's obviously a lot of overlap, but yeah, there are wells I find on the XY well search that I don't find on the 5-mile radius search and vice versa.
Thank you.
And I just did that 6 months ago, so I know that that's a fact. This is something I just had.
Definite discrepancies. Would the 100-foot step out apply to only indoor air exceedances, or would the sub-slab soil gas exceedances require the step outs? I'm sorry, Kathy.
I'm sorry, I'm having a terrible time with my headset today. It's hating me. Say it one more time. I apologize.
We can hear you now. Would the 100-foot step out apply to only indoor air exceedances, or would the sub-slab soil gas exceedances require the step outs?
My understanding, it's only the indoor air, but DEP, what say you?
Anyone
It's a
from
secret.
DEP?
It's a secret.
Emily.
I'm here. It's good. It only applies to VCs and IECs, so that would be when you have an indoor air exceedance.
I did know something. Thank you.
You got it.
Okay. Do you answer eco questions for current conditions or all history? For example, if soil with concentrations above ESC has been removed.
I think you would still answer the question affirmatively, but you want to include that information. Certainly, if it's been remediated, then include that information.
Is it appropriate to compare soil data from upland areas to ESD when there is no pathway to ESNR? In other words, can the answer to the question just be MA?
Well, you would still, I believe, answer affirmatively that, if your upland soil data exceeds the ecological screening criteria, but if there's no pathway, then there's no pathway. You would answer no to that specific question, but you would still answer in the affirmative if you have concentrations above the ecological screening criteria. Remember, you have to have 2, 3, and 4 have to be yes in order for you to have to move on and, have an actual remedial investigation of an ESNR.
Awesome. Are tables comparing results to ESC still required if no ESNRs or potential migration identified on or adjacent to the site?
I would think no. Like if there's no way to have a completed pathway, then I would say that it's moot. But use your professional judgment with the information that you want to include. Just be thorough. Explain yourself.
Thank you. During the RI for an ecological investigation, can soil or groundwater data be extrapolated for delineation, similar to a soil or groundwater investigation, or is point compliance required?
I would say that the same rules would apply, but obviously, by the time you're getting, if you're going to say, "Hey, I'm done," obviously you want clean point compliance.
All right, thank you for all of the questions. Oh, sorry, Lynn, go ahead.
I just want to clarify something that Candace just said.
Yes, please.
You can't extrapolate for eco. You have to have point-by-point compliance for eco.
There you go.
That is in the updated tech regs that were posted yesterday, as well as in the prior version.
All right, thank you so much for that clarification. We are about out of time, so if you could go to the next slide, please. Just another reminder to please fill out the course evaluation, and that CEC information, if you are looking for CECs, will be provided by the LSRPA, not by the department. And we just want to thank you again for joining us today. And sorry about the technical glitches that we had, but we hope you enjoyed the training, and we'll see you again soon.